They thought I'd forgotten. They were counting on it. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, sterile and cold. I stared at the acoustic tiles on the ceiling, counting the little holes for the 100th time. Anything to distract from the pain radiating through my chest, from the IV drip that felt like ice water crawling up my arm, from the silence that screamed louder than any alarm. 3 days. 3 days since the heart attack knocked me flat in my own driveway. 3 days since the ambulance came. 3 days in this bed, and the only voices I'd heard were the nurses asking me to rate my pain on a scale of 1 to 10. What number do you give to the pain of realizing your own children haven't called? The door creaked open. My pulse quickened maybe this time. But it was just Denise, the night nurse with kind eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. She'd seen too much in this place. How are we feeling, Mr. Harrison? She checked the monitor, jotted something on her clipboard. Arthur, I said. My voice came out rough. Just Arthur. Arthur, then. She adjusted my pillow. Is there anyone we should call? Family? The paperwork shows you have children. I closed my eyes. They're busy. I heard her pen stop moving. When I opened my eyes, she was looking at me with that expression. Healthcare workers must practice in training, professional sympathy without pity. I'm sure they'll visit soon, she said softly. I didn't correct her. What would I say? That my son Marcus called once, 3 hours after the hospital notified him, just long enough to ask if I'd updated my insurance beneficiaries? That my daughter Rachel sent a text, not even a phone call, a text saying she couldn't get off work? That my youngest, Tyler, hadn't responded at all? After Denise left, I lay there in the dark, listening to the monitors beep out the rhythm of a heart that apparently still worked, even when it felt shattered. I built a construction company from nothing. 42 years of waking up before dawn, coming home after dark, concrete dust in my lungs and lumber splinters in my hands. I built houses for strangers while I was building a future for my kids. Every foundation I poured, every roof I raised, I did it thinking of them. Marcus got his MBA. Rachel got her law degree. Tyler got his dream of opening a restaurant. I paid for all of it, not loans paid, in full. Because that's what a father does, right? You sacrifice so your children don't have to. My wife, Sarah, would have handled this differently. She would have called them herself, would have guilt-tripped them into showing up with that sweet, firm way she had. But Sarah had been gone for 7 years now, and I'd learned that the skills you build on a construction site don't translate to navigating relationships. The next morning, Dr. Patel made his rounds. Young guy, probably Tyler's age. He explained the stent they'd put in, the medications I'd need, the lifestyle changes ahead. You'll need help for a while, he said. Someone to drive you to follow-up appointments, help around the house for a few weeks. Do you have family nearby? I'll manage, I said. He frowned at his tablet. Mr. Harrison, you had a significant cardiac event. This isn't something to take lightly. I really recommend, I said. I'll manage. He left looking concerned, which made two of us. That afternoon, my phone finally rang. Marcus? I grabbed it so fast I nearly pulled out the IV. Dad, hey. His voice had that tone, busy, distracted, already halfway to his next task. Just wanted to check in. How are you feeling? Better, I lied. The doctors say I'll be out soon. That's great, that's great. I heard keyboard clicks in the background. He was multitasking. Listen, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Have you thought about, getting your affairs in order? Estate planning, that kind of thing? My grip tightened on the phone. I had a heart attack, Marcus. I'm not dying. I know. That's not what I meant. It's just, this is a wake-up call, right? At your age, it makes sense to be prepared. Rachel and Tyler and I were talking, and we think it would give everyone peace of mind if we knew what your plans were. For the house, the company, the money, I finished. Silence. Then, that's not what this is about. When are you coming to visit? More silence. Dad, I'm in Seattle right now. Big project. Can't leave. But Rachel's closer. I'm sure She texted that she's too busy at the firm. Well, Tyler then? Haven't heard from him at all. The keyboard clicking had stopped. Look, we're all dealing with our own stuff, okay? We can't just drop everything because you had a health scare. We have responsibilities. A health scare. That's what 42 years of sacrifice earned me. A health scare. Marcus, I said slowly, when you needed money to start your consulting firm, who gave you $50,000? Dad. That's not. When Rachel's student loans were drowning her, who paid them off? All 120,000? This isn't fair. When Tyler's restaurant was failing and he needed a cash infusion to avoid bankruptcy, who wrote that check? We're grateful. We've always been grateful. But you can't hold that over us forever. You chose to do those things. We didn't ask you to. The words hit like a physical blow. I hadn't asked him to be grateful. I just expected him to care. I have to go, he said into the silence. Meeting in 5. We'll talk soon, okay? The line went dead. I set the phone down carefully, afraid that if I moved too fast, something inside me would break that the doctors couldn't fix with a stent. Denise came in later with dinner. If you could call the gray meat and mushy vegetables dinner. She took one look at my face and sat down in the chair beside the bed. Bad news? No news, I said. Which might be worse. She nodded like she understood. I've been doing this for 23 years. You see patterns. Want to know what I've learned? I wasn't sure I did, but she continued anyway. The patients who have the most visitors, usually not the ones who gave their kids everything. It's the ones who made their kids work for it, who maintained boundaries, who didn't sacrifice every single thing. She patted my hand. Love without limits often gets taken for granted. You a nurse or a philosopher? Both. Night shift gives you time to think. She stood up. Eat your dinner. Doctor says you might go home tomorrow if your numbers stay stable. Home. To that big empty house I'd bought thinking I'd fill it with grandchildren. To the silence that used to feel peaceful, but now just felt lonely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Marcus's words. You chose to do those things. We didn't ask you to. He was right. They hadn't asked. I'd volunteered. Every time. Every opportunity to teach them the value of hard work, of earning their way, of struggling a little, I'd eliminated it because I loved them, because I didn't want them to suffer like I had. And in doing so, I'd raised 3 people who saw my love as an entitlement rather than a gift. The next day, Dr. Patel discharged me with a pharmacy's worth of medications and stern warnings. I called an Uber to take me home. As we pulled up to the house, the 4-bedroom colonial I'd built myself, literally, after I'd made enough to afford it, I saw something on the porch, a package, medium-sized Amazon Prime. I hauled myself up the steps, each one a reminder of my newly limited cardiovascular capacity, and picked it up. Addressed to Tyler Harrison. My address. I stood there, package in hand, understanding dawning. He'd been using my address for deliveries. Probably because his apartment building had package theft issues. He'd been using my address and hadn't even told me. Hadn't asked permission. Just assumed. The way he'd assumed I'd always be there to bail him out, to solve his problems, to fund his dreams. I left the package on the porch and went inside. The house felt different, emptier. I'd always thought of it as waiting for Sunday dinners, waiting for holiday gatherings, waiting to be filled with the family I'd worked so hard to provide for. But it wasn't waiting. It was empty because they didn't want to fill it. I made myself a sandwich with one hand while the other clutched the list of medications I needed to take. The bread was stale. When had I bought it? Before the heart attack? Everything from before felt like a different lifetime. My phone buzzed. Tyler. Finally. The text read, Hey Dad, heard you were in the hospital. You good? Also, I have a package coming to your place. Can you hold it for me? Not, are you okay? Not, what happened? Not, do you need anything? Can you hold my package? I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, I'm fine. Package is on the porch. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, cool, thanks. I'll grab it sometime next week. Sometime next week. I'd had a heart attack 4 days ago, and he'd pick up his package sometime next week. I set the phone down and walked to my office, the small room off the kitchen where I kept my desk, my files, all the paperwork of a life spent building things. On the wall hung photos of my kids at various ages, Marcus in his cap and gown, Rachel at her law school graduation, Tyler at his restaurant opening, me standing beside him with my arm around his shoulders. I'd been so proud that day. I sat down at the desk and opened my laptop. My hands shook slightly after effect of the heart attack, or something else. I wasn't sure. I pulled up my will, the one I'd made 10 years ago, right after Sarah died. Everything split three ways. The house, the remains of the construction company I'd sold, the investments, the savings, all of it. Divided equally among Marcus, Rachel, and Tyler. I thought I was being fair. I thought I was being a good father. But fairness isn't just about equal distribution. It's also about equal devotion, equal care, equal presence. And my children had shown me exactly how equal their devotion was. None. I spent that evening making calls. First to James Whitmore, my attorney for the past 20 years. He was surprised to hear from me. More surprised when I told him what I wanted. Arthur, are you sure about this? It's a big change. Maybe you should take some time. Let things settle after the medical event. I've had nothing but time to think, James. I want it done. He sighed. I'll draw up the paperwork. Can you come to the office next week? I'll be there Monday. Next, I called David Chen, who'd bought my construction company 5 years ago. We'd stayed friendly. I'd even consulted on a few projects, more for something to do than for the money. Arthur, how are you? I heard you'd had some health trouble. Word travels fast. Small business community. You know how it is. His voice softened. Seriously, how are you doing? It was the first time someone had asked like they actually wanted to know the answer. I'm okay, I said, and meant it more than I had when I'd said it to Marcus. Listen, I have a proposition for you. By the time I finished making arrangements, it was late. I felt tired, but it was a different kind of tired than the exhaustion that had weighed on me in the hospital. This was the tiredness of having done something, of having made decisions, of having taken back control. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Monday came. I drove myself to James's office, against Dr. Patel's recommendations, but in accordance with my own determination to prove I wasn't an invalid. The new will was ready for my signature. Last chance to change your mind, James said, pushing the papers across his mahogany desk. I read through it one more time. It was simple, clear, and final. To my children, I leave the following personal items: my high school yearbook, my wedding album, and the handwritten letters their mother wrote me over the years. These are worth more than anything else I could give them, though I doubt they'll see it that way. The house will be sold, with proceeds going to Habitat for Humanity. The remainder of my estate will be divided equally between 3 scholarships. One for first-generation college students pursuing trades, one for single parents returning to education, and one for small business owners facing hardship. To Marcus, Rachel, and Tyler, I leave this final message. I loved you enough to give you everything. I hope you learn to love your own children enough to make them earn something. I signed on all the required lines. James witnessed it, looking troubled but professional. They're going to contest this, he said. Let them try. I'm of sound mind. You can attest to that. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it out of clarity. What brought this on, Arthur? Really? I thought about that package on my porch, about Marcus's phone call, about Rachel's text, about Tyler's silence. They taught me something, I said finally. They taught me that love can't be bought, no matter how much you spend. And if I couldn't buy their love with everything I gave them, I sure as hell won't reward them for not having it. James nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think Sarah would have supported this. Sarah would have done it years ago. She was always smarter about these things than me. I left his office feeling lighter. The weight I'd been carrying, the responsibility of being everyone's ATM, everyone's safety net, everyone's solution, it was gone. I'd spent 42 years building a legacy for my children. Now I'd spend however many years I had left building a legacy that actually mattered. Over the next few weeks, I focused on recovery, physical therapy, cardiac rehab, learning to take my medications on schedule. I also started volunteering at the Habitat build site twice a week, doing light work, mostly consulting on structural issues. It felt good to be useful without being used. Marcus called once during this time, asking if I'd thought any more about estate planning. I told him I'd taken care of it. Great, he said, sounding relieved. So you set up a trust, distributed assets, all that? Something like that. Rachel texted a few times, mostly forwarding me articles about heart-healthy diets and exercise, as if Google results were a substitute for actual presence. Tyler showed up exactly once to pick up his package. He stayed for 10 minutes, spent 8 of them on his phone, and left saying he had to get back to the restaurant. "We should grab dinner sometime," he said as he headed out. "Sure," I said, knowing we wouldn't. I watched him drive away in the BMW I'd helped him buy when his first car died, and I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt. I just felt done. The holidays came, Thanksgiving first. In years past, I'd hosted, cooking enough food for a small army, hoping my kids would come and bring friends, partners, future grandchildren. They usually showed up for an hour or two, ate, and left. This year, I volunteered at the community center, serving turkey dinner to people who had nowhere else to go. I sat with a veteran named Eddie, who told me stories about Korea. I laughed with a woman named Rosa, who'd recently lost her job but not her sense of humor. I felt more connected to these strangers than I had to my own children in years. Christmas was harder. The house felt too big, too quiet. I almost broke down and called one of them. Almost played the guilt card first Christmas since my heart attack. "Don't you want to see your old man?" But I didn't. Instead, I drove to the children's hospital and dropped off the toys I'd bought. Watched kids' faces light up at the prospect of something new, something chosen just for them. One little girl, maybe 6 years old, hugged a stuffed elephant to her chest and looked up at me with huge eyes. "Is this really for me?" she asked. "Really and truly," I said. "Thank you, mister. Thank you so much." I thought about my own children at that age, how they'd had so many toys they barely noticed new ones, how they'd grown up in abundance and learned to expect it rather than appreciate it. "You're welcome, sweetheart." That was the moment I knew, with absolute certainty, that I'd made the right decision. January brought a new year and a new rhythm to my life. I settled into routines that didn't involve waiting for phone calls that never came or hoping for visits that never materialized. I played chess at the senior center. I took a woodworking class. I even went on a date with a woman named Patricia. I met at cardiac rehab, though nothing came of it except a nice conversation over coffee. It was a smaller life than the one I'd imagined, but it was mine. In March, James called, "You need to come to the office. It's time." I knew what he meant. I'd been feeling increasingly tired lately, some new symptoms that Dr. Patel said required investigation. We both knew what that meant at my age. With my history, the house needed to be sold. The scholarships needed to be established. Everything needed to be finalized while I still could. "I'll be there tomorrow," I said. That night, I sat in my office one more time, looking at those photos on the wall. I took them down, one by one, and placed them in a box. Not throwing them away, I wasn't that bitter, but not keeping them on display either. They were memories of a time when I'd believed in a future that was never going to happen. At the bottom of the box, I placed a letter I'd written for each of them. Not angry letters, not vindictive, just honest, explaining why I'd made the choices I'd made, what I'd hoped they'd learn, where I thought I'd gone wrong. "I love you," each letter ended. "I always have, and I always will. But loving you doesn't mean I have to fund you. It doesn't mean I have to enable you. It doesn't mean I have to pretend that your absence doesn't hurt or that your indifference is acceptable. I hope someday you understand that the greatest gift I could give you now is letting you stand on your own. I hope someday you learn what it means to sacrifice for someone without expecting anything in return. I hope you're better parents than I was, though I suspect you'll have to be." The next morning, I went to James's office and signed the final papers. The house went on the market. The scholarships were established. The will was finalized, witnessed, notarized, locked away. "How do you feel?" James asked as I stood to leave. I thought about that question, really thought about it. "Free," I said, and I was. I lived for another 14 months, long enough to see the house sell to a young couple expecting their first child, long enough to see the first scholarship awarded to a kid who reminded me of myself at 18, hungry, determined, willing to work, long enough to make peace with my choices, both the ones I'd made as a father and the ones I'd made in the aftermath of realizing what kind of people those choices had created. My children didn't visit much during that time. Marcus came once, ostensibly to check on me, but really to feel out whether I'd changed my mind about the will. Rachel called occasionally, usually when she needed advice about a case that reminded her I'd once known something about contract law from running a business. Tyler didn't reach out at all. I didn't chase them. I didn't beg. I just lived. When the end came, it was quick. Another heart attack, massive this time. I was at the Habitat site, ironically enough, consulting on a foundation that needed reinforcement. I remember thinking how fitting it was, spent my whole life building foundations for people, seemed right to go out doing the same. The funeral was small. James arranged it according to my instructions. A few old friends from the construction days, the volunteers from Habitat, Patricia from cardiac rehab, Eddie from the community center. My children came, of course. They stood together in the front row, looking appropriately somber. I wondered if they were sad or just performing sadness for the handful of attendees. The real fireworks came at the reading of the will. I wasn't there, obviously, but James told me later, well, he told my memory, I suppose, since I'd asked him to write down exactly what happened, for posterity, or maybe just for my own satisfaction. According to James, Marcus went red in the face. Rachel's jaw dropped. Tyler actually laughed, like it had to be a joke. "This can't be legal," Marcus said. "It's completely legal," James replied. "Your father was of sound mind, and I have documentation to prove it." "He was angry about the hospital thing," Rachel said. "He wasn't thinking clearly. We can contest this. You can try. But I'll fight you, and I'll win." "Your father knew exactly what he was doing. We're his children," Tyler said. And for the first time since he'd been a kid, James said, he actually sounded emotional. "He can't just leave us nothing." "He didn't leave you nothing. He left you his yearbook, his wedding album, and your mother's letters. He also left you each a personal letter." James handed them the envelopes. He said they just stared at them like they might explode. "That's it?" Marcus asked. "Letters? That's it. The house, the money, everything goes to charity? Scholarships, primarily. And yes, I wish I could have seen their faces. But maybe it's better I didn't. I'd seen enough disappointment from them to last a lifetime. Literally." James said Rachel was the first to open her letter. She read it silently, and something in her expression shifted. Cracked, maybe. She looked up at James with tears in her eyes. "Did he really feel this way?" "I think you know the answer to that." Marcus grabbed his letter, read it quickly, then crumpled it in his fist. "This is manipulative bullshit. Even in death, he's trying to control us, trying to teach us some lesson." "He's not trying to control you," James interrupted. "He's letting you go. There's a difference." Tyler didn't open his letter at all. He just stood up, shoved it in his pocket, and walked out. Rachel sat there for a long time, reading and rereading her letter. Finally, she looked at James and asked, "What were the scholarships for?" He told her. She nodded slowly. "That sounds like something Mom would have done. Your father said the same thing. He should have done this years ago." "That's what I told him." She laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "We really screwed up, didn't we?" James, being a professional, didn't answer that, but he told me later that he thought it anyway. In the months after, James said, interesting things happened. Marcus tried to contest the will, like they'd predicted. It went nowhere. But in the process of digging through his father's financial records, he found something. Years of receipts, canceled checks, bank statements. Every penny Arthur had given his children, documented. 50,000 here, 120,000 there. Smaller amounts scattered throughout, totaling over $600,000 across the three of them. James said Marcus showed up at his office one day, looking like he hadn't slept. "I didn't know," he said. "I mean, I knew he gave us money, but I didn't know it was this much. I didn't know He couldn't finish the sentence. "Your father never wanted you to know the full extent," James said. "He didn't give to be thanked. He gave because he loved you." "Past tense," Marcus said quietly. "You made it past tense." Not him. Rachel apparently had a different reaction. She threw herself into pro bono work, particularly cases involving elder abuse and family abandonment. James heard through the legal community that she'd become something of a crusader for seniors whose families had taken advantage of them. He ran into her at a bar association event a year after Arthur's death. "I keep seeing my dad in every client," she told him. "Every story of kids who only call when they need money, who disappear when things get hard, who treat their parents like ATMs. She shook her head. "I get so angry on their behalf. And then I realized that's what we did. That's exactly what we did." "What are you going to do about it?" James asked. "I don't know. I can't apologize to him. He's gone. You could live differently." That might be apology enough. Tyler's response was the most surprising. 6 months after the funeral, he showed up at the first scholarship award ceremony. He sat in the back, watching as a young woman accepted the scholarship for single parents. She gave a speech about juggling 2 jobs and night school, about her daughter who gave her a reason to keep going, about how this money meant she could finally finish her degree. After the ceremony, Tyler approached the coordinator. "I want to contribute," he said, "to the scholarship fund, anonymously." "That's very generous. May I ask why?" Tyler pulled out the letter from his pocket. It was worn, creased from being read and reread. "My father taught me something," he said. "It just took me a while to learn it." He contributed every month after that. Not huge amounts, his restaurant still struggled sometimes, but consistently. James, as the fund administrator, saw the payments come through. Tyler Harrison, $500, every month, like clockwork. James called it Arthur's last construction project, building something even after he was gone, laying a foundation that would support people for years to come. I like to think that wherever Arthur is, he knows. He knows that Marcus finally understood the weight of sacrifice, that Rachel channeled her guilt into helping others, that Tyler learned, too late to say thank you, but not too late to pay it forward. He gave them everything, and they took it for granted. So he gave them nothing, and they finally learned what everything meant. The yearbook, the wedding album, the letters, those were the only things of Arthur's that his children kept. Well, that and the lessons. The hard ones, the ones that hurt, the ones that stick. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. Sometimes it's consequences. Sometimes the last gift a father can give is letting his children finally grow up. And sometimes, though they don't deserve it, they actually do.